Hi, everyone. I have a special announcement to make. As you know, the mission of our podcast is to affirm, inspire, and motivate HOA board members. One way we hope to do that is with the launch of our new board member merch store. As a gift to boards who are meeting online, we're offering dozens of free and fun Zoom backgrounds designed specifically with you in mind. We've provided a link to the new store in our show notes. Please check it out.
But attorneys do not do collections. This is a message I'm trying to send out to everybody. They do security interest enforcement. Attorneys, if they do foreclosures in California, according to the Supreme Court of Dusky versus McCarthy, they are not doing the practice of licensed collections. The Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision in 2018, said that non-judicial foreclosures are not the act of collections.
HOA Insights, common sense for common areas, exists to help all 2 million volunteer board members nationwide have the right information at the right time to make the right decisions for their future. This podcast is sponsored by 4 companies that care about board members: Association Insights and Marketplace, Association Reserves, Community Financials, and Kevin Davis Insurance Services. You'll find links to their websites and social media in the show notes.
Welcome back to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. I'm Robert Nordlund, and I'm here today for episode number 54 with a special guest to talk about maximizing cash flow at your association. Because your association is a nonprofit run by, well, you all know, volunteer board members, you've got to be careful to maintain your cash flow. So minimizing your delinquencies and maximizing cash flow helps you pay your bills and make your scheduled reserve transfers. There are things you can do to keep a strong cash flow at your association. So adjust your volume, settle in, because we're going to provide some answers and some help for you today. Well, we enjoy hearing from you, so if you have a question you'd like us to address, leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. Leave a comment on one of the YouTube videos or send us an email at podcast@reservestudy.com. Now, the question that prompted today's episode was from George from Cleveland, who wrote, "Is there such a thing as an acceptable rate of delinquencies?" And that's a fascinating question. It's certainly not my area of expertise, but fortunately, today we have Mitch Drimmer with us on the podcast. Mitchell Drimmer, CMCA, LCAM, and those are manager credentials, is the president of Axela Technologies. You can find them online at axela-tech.com, and that's axela-tech.com. And Mitch is the author of the book, The Art of Collections for Community Associations. Next time I see him in person, I'm going to have him sign my copy. Well, with a wealth of experience spanning 3 decades, sounds like me, Mitch has dedicated his career to assisting community associations, advocating for a compassionate approach to delinquent assessments, and his position is that it's better to work it out than put them out. That reflects his commitment to finding amicable solutions. Well, I've bumped into Mitch in countless trade shows, and with our Reserve Study Council and his Cash Flow Council, we seem to have kindred spirits. He's exactly the kind of guy we want to share with our podcast audience. So, Mitch, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Robert. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
So tell me, is there an acceptable amount of delinquencies at an association?
Well, as you mentioned in your introduction, associations are a not-for-profit, which means a $0 business, which means that for every dollar that you have budgeted to spend, you have to assess people, but you can't do any more than that. So actually, zero. There is no acceptable delinquency amount. However, the question could be, how can it be tolerated and how can it be managed? The first thing that has to happen is the budget. And if a board of directors budgets for doubtful debt, then the association will not have any shortfalls. The assessments will be higher, but you won't have shortfalls. And believe me, the poor pay more. So when you have shortfalls, the association is paying more to function. You're paying late fees to vendors. You're paying insurance premium costs. In other words, you get your insurance premiums now because you don't have adequate cash. You have to take out a loan. So now you're paying interest on your premiums.
Yeah, let me stop you right there. I hadn't really appreciated that. I thought this was all about owners, but I think it starts with the board. I think you're right that if you've got a budget that is just barely hanging on, or in so many cases of associations, it's actually slightly negative, they're in a hole to start with. They've got no margin.
None whatsoever. Now, a lot of people don't understand reserves. And I have a very good explanation for board members when it comes to reserves. Reserves are like your 401k. You put it aside for your old age and you use it. Because a lot of board members come and say, if we're a not-for-profit, how do we account for the reserve account? That's a profit. I said, no, it's like a 401k. And that's how we should really approach it. Like it's a business and like you're saving for your future.
Yeah. Right. We talk about it as paying the cost of ongoing deterioration. It's not charity for someone in the future, but yeah, it's a bill. The roof deteriorates every month, and it's just as real a bill as the power bill or the water bill or the management company bill.
More important, it's your future.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about delinquencies. When I think of delinquencies, we deal with clients and their finances all the time. There's a lot that are out there that I wonder, not is it acceptable? Because yeah, it's almost a zero-based budget. There's no profit to absorb, but what is, should we say, common? And as long as you're dealing with it, and we'll talk about dealing with it in just a moment, but what is common? We're talking 0 to 3%, 0 to 5%. What is common out there?
You're talking about, now I deal in all 50 states.
Okay.
So we're talking about every region in the United States. We're spanning all demographics. We're even spanning all kinds of psychographics because, there are some communities with younger people and there are some communities with older people, and they think differently. Generally, the delinquency rate during good times, it's not 2008.
Yeah.
It's around 3 to 5%. Still unacceptable. But what I see quite often is that delinquencies just keep getting dragged on and on and on. They do not pull the trigger at some point to resolve the delinquencies, our board members.
Well, I think that's the key. It's one thing to have a delinquency, and I think there's going to be people who go out of town or they change their credit card and there's going to be a bump in the cash flow, and you can say, hey, people in unit number 13, you missed your payment last month. Is there something going on? They say, oh, totally sorry. Let me make it up. So there are going to be well-intended, unfortunate mistakes. And so I think we need to allow that. But I like that word that you said, the unresolved ones. You don't want that 30 days to become 60 days to 90 days and 2 years.
Right. Well, the policy, or the best policy is, of course, to establish a uniform collection policy. Everybody in your community associations, and most community associations, have these little 3-ring binders for California, I'm sure, for fire, for flood, and here in Florida, it's for hurricane. Why don't you have a 3-ring binder for delinquencies, for what happens when you have a delinquency? You have no plan.
Yeah, your trigger points.
Exactly. In other words, the only plan is when the board gets together after, sometime, not every board meets every month. When they get together, they'll look at the aging and they'll say, oh, send that off to the attorney. It gets turfed to the attorney. And many management companies are only too happy to do that because it takes it off their plate after they do their first party notifications. But what does an attorney do after all? They do not do robust outreach. They do not engage the owners. They do not find the owners. Maybe they do a skip trace, but I don't see a community association attorney or their paralegals picking up the phone and calling people and saying you're delinquent and you've got $50,000 worth of equity, you owe the association $3,000, doesn't it make sense to make a payment? Because if you don't pay Visa, they're not going to take away your home. But the community association does have a security interest. And a lot of people, you line up 10 average board members or average community association owners and ask them, does the association have a security interest? Can they foreclose in your house for non-payment of assessments? 7 out of 10 will say only the bank can foreclose. So how is it that when somebody is delinquent, well, 1 month, like you said, that's an accident. That's things happen. 2 months, if you're on a monthly pay period, if somebody has missed 2 months, well, now you have more than a technical problem. That's not a delinquency. That's a default. There's a difference because there's no intention now of paying. And when that happens, first of all, you have to engage the owner. Well, of course, you get your first-party notifications from your management company. And depending on the state, there's many very complicated, what we call condition precedents. For instance, in California, you can't foreclose on somebody unless they're a year late or $1,800 in arrears.
Ouch. Okay.
Yeah. So, but you can put somebody into collections. You see, you don't have to foreclose on them. So why wait all that time? But the thing is, the idea is to engage people and convince them. And guess what? We do that. It's done. It's possible. You talk to people, you engage them, you find them. And that's why our skip trace is very important. You find them, you engage them. So my best practices for a community association is to establish that uniform collection policy. And I have templates, and we'll talk about how I could get everybody some templates for a uniform collection policy that's in Word format, and then you could fill in the blanks.
Oh, gee, that would be gold. Being a board member is hard enough. You're trying to deal with paying the bills, making sure the management company is working, making sure the landscaper is doing the assigned projects, changing seasonal colors, dealing with the people who want to convert a tennis court into a pickleball court. There's a million things going on. And Mrs. Jones's barking dog. The Smiths, they are new residents and they have a big dog, Old English sheepdog. And there's a 30-pound limit in our association. Yeah, it's hard enough. And now we talk about cash flow. And you talked about how expensive it gets. This is not just a minor thing, because what comes to mind is when there's 1 or 2 people who just aren't paying, then the burden falls on the good guys, the people who are paying.
The good paying owners have to take up the slack. And that's actuarially unfair.
That is so unfair. That I like when good behavior is rewarded, not punished. And so I like this conversation today. So we're talking about having a nice policy that guides the board so it is stable from year to year to year to year as the board members change, and one that starts out easy and saying, hey, you have a problem? Because I'm writing notes here. Policy that is appropriate and trying to catch a delinquency before it goes to a default, engage the owner, talk about the wisdom of the situation, and have it be uniform. Is that where we're talking about?
Well, it's important. Yes, it has to be uniform and it has to be consistent because we have obligations to HUD. Some states don't have HOA statutes, so they depend on, the federal government for, the HUD, the Fair Housing Administration. So you have to be very careful. We got the FDCPA, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act involved here. So let's say you've got 2 owners. Each one owes $1,000 for the same amount of time. Okay. And the board puts one into collections and not the other.
Ooh.
There's a charge of unequal enforcement that you're facing, and that could be a civil rights charge. And if that happens, well, get online, everybody, because everybody's going to start suing the association for civil rights violations. It's going to be like a free-for-all.
Well, now I'm thinking that $1,000 delinquency all of a sudden becomes a very, very expensive legal bill, and you've really shot yourself in the foot.
Very, very true. Look, I love attorneys. Community associations are creatures of statute, so your attorneys are necessary. But attorneys do not do collections. This is a message I'm trying to send out to everybody. They do security interest enforcement. As a matter of fact, in California, you're in California, right?
Yes.
Attorneys, if they do foreclosures in California, according to the Supreme Court of Dusky versus McCarthy, they are not doing the practice of licensed collections. The Supreme Court, in a unanimous decision in 2018, said that non-judicial foreclosures are not the act of collections. So why would you say that an attorney is collecting? Like I said, they don't have outbound calls. They don't have the technology. They don't have inbound calls facilities. They don't do letter strings. They don't do collections. They swoop up units. Now, sometimes these units have equity, and if you have an association lien foreclosure, you're going to be made whole. But sometimes they don't have equity. But often the attorneys will not advise in advance what the results would be.
Yeah.
And I believe that you should not enter into a foreclosure unless you know that the property will be purchased in an association lien foreclosure. Because if there is no equity, it will not be picked up in an association lien foreclosure, which is okay. But the board of directors should understand that when that happens, in order to monetize the unit, they need to rent the unit out. Now, that's a lot cheaper. Now, sometimes, again, one of the biggest problems I see with boards of directors is the kicking the can down the road concept. For instance, the Surfside tragedy, Champlain Towers, that was you could say, well, it was the structure underneath the pool, it was this, it was that. It was the board of directors kicking the can down on preventive maintenance, structural integrity reserve studies, knowing what's doing, and acting. It was the board of directors who I'm not going to say was responsible because it's legal responsibility or not, but that's where the buck stops, at the board of directors. And somehow they failed the association. But if you have collections, if you have delinquencies, get a collection policy. Allow your management company to do its condition precedents. Again, in Colorado, you have to offer a payment plan. Same thing in Texas. You have to do many things. And then when you're not moving the needle, I believe it should go to collections. Allow collections to do a robust engagement with the delinquent owners that are data-driven. And after a certain amount of time, I know my company, we're going to say to the board of directors, this can't continue. It's 126 days. We've called, we've talked, and we're not moving the needles. Now let's discuss foreclosure. Let's review. Let's see how much equity is in the unit. Let's see what the fact pattern is. If there's other liens and encumbrances, let's project what the outcome of this legal action will be. That's that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think, my brain is spinning because, number one, this is not my world. So I'm glad we have you on the program. I think so many board members are probably feeling the same thing, that if this person is delinquent, then we call the attorney. And there's all these steps in between. And I'm remembering now, we had some good friends, and the husband died of a sudden heart attack, young, 30, 40, something like that, a couple of young kids. And our company had just, completed the reserve study for that association. And I reached out and I called the management company, spoke to the manager and said, hey, these are friends of ours. Can you give them 90 days of grace? They have money, but we've got a grieving widow here. Just want to let you know, they're probably going to be late for the next 3 months. Don't give them grief. They've got, the husband died. And the manager was like, oh, I know that couple. They're nice. I'm so sorry to hear. And I haven't thought about that for a decade or two. But I think this whole in-between process that you're talking about, reach out, understand what the human process can be, catch delinquencies before they become defaults, find out if you're really dealing with a problem or not, or an accident. And then in my world, we try to make sure our clients are funding reserves, that ongoing cost of deterioration, with the budget, which is the start of seemingly everything. When we try to leave special assessments for the last resort. And I think what you're saying also is, don't jump to that last resort. The foreclosure is the last resort. There's so many steps in between.
Exactly. And I always like to tell people, your governing documents defines your association. Your budget tells you where your association is going. And your uniform collection policy will tell you how to get there.
I like that. Well, Mitch, we've got so much to speak about. I've got a follow-up question on that point. But first, let's take a quick break to hear from one of our sponsors.
Numbers matter, and we need numbers like gain scores and bank balances to let us know where we stand. The same is true for your association. Is yours thriving or struggling? Let me introduce you to the FICO Health Score, like your own personal FICO credit score. Now in one simple number, owners and boards can learn the combined financial, physical, and operational health of their association. The good news, it's free at ourfico.com. That's our, FIPHO.com. Learn how your association measures up.
And we're back. Mitch, I want to come back to that point of remaining fair and dealing with this on a human side and a compassionate side, offering payment plans. Those, I believe, will look different to different people. Is that
right?
Accurate?
Right. Again, there is the right size of payment plan. For instance, if you're in a community association that's an HOA that has $150 a year, you don't want to give somebody an 18-month payment plan. That's absurd. Give them a 6-month payment plan. I find 18-month payment plans are a little too long and projected. To me, the Goldilocks number on average is a 12-month payment plan.
Okay.
And, we offer it. And again, we don't charge for it. If your attorney charges for payment plans and maintaining a payment plan, well, when somebody's down, you don't put your foot on their backs. You give them a helping hand up. And again, once they go into attorneys, you have just doomed the owner, the delinquent owner, to a huge amount of obstacles in order to make the association whole. Now they have to pay their delinquent assessments. Plus, they got to pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. I've seen attorney bills go up to $15,000, $20,000 on something. So people just can't dig themselves out. So what have you just done? You've created somebody who is going to lose their home. And I want to tell you a good piece of advice. And I say this at almost every meeting I have.
Not that you're giving bad advice.
Well, no, an excellent piece of advice. And this is for management companies, not just for board members. Today's delinquent homeowner is tomorrow's board president. And they're going to remember the credit journey, the collections journey. They're going to remember that you sent them to an attorney and you tried to take away their home. But if you engage them and work it out and help them and lift them up, they will have no reason to run for the board of directors. Because once they do get on the board of directors, if they had an unpleasant journey, they'll eat a bowl of crazy, wash it down with a glass of stupid, and fire the management company, blaming them for everything. You want to keep your clients, then engage in a reasonable collection program where there's a hierarchy. First-party notifications, collection agency engagement, and then, if you have to, go legal. Now, I want to talk about one thing that's important. A lot of attorneys go for money judgments. That's absurd. The only time money judgments are a good idea is when you have those $150 a year associations. If somebody's delinquent for $150 a year, if they go 5 years delinquent, that's $750. I'm not taking away anybody's home. I don't want that account.
Yeah.
Okay? If you're going to go to court on a money judgment for a significant amount of money, why would you get a money judgment when you've got a security interest in the process? You've engaged them for 126 days. They refuse to pay. Now they deserve to lose their home. I'm sorry. I don't like foreclosure, but I don't like families who have budgeted well and made responsible choices be forced out of their homes because the assessments go up. Because if somebody doesn't pay it, assessments go up, special assessments happen, and then people start to disappear. What people disappear? Where'd the security guard go? Where's the doorman? Where's the valet? Where's the services in my building? What happened? Or my HOA? How come the pool is green like olives? And that is money judgment does nothing. Because if you get a money judgment, you got to go back into court to get a writ of garnishment or writ of execution. You got to find their money. And then many places have exemptions. Head of household is famous in Florida. So again, money judgments are not worth it. So if you have any attorney trying to talk you into money judgments, say no. Say if you're going to go to court for a good reason. Go to court to foreclose, but only after the hierarchy, first party notifications, intensive, robust engagement with the owner, then you should go legal, because now you have the right to go legal from an ethical perspective.
Yeah. Well, we came back from break talking about fairness. Again, it starts with a budget. Make sure you have a budget that is reasonable so you're not doomed from the start. But I don't like when the hardworking payers on time may have to face increased assessments to make up for delinquencies. That's not fair. It's also not fair to hurt people when they're down, to hitting them with a lot of legal fees. Boy, if I got a letter in the mail from an attorney saying I've been a bad boy, those are fighting words. And I don't want there to be a fight for just an accident. And so if there's an accident where someone's out of town, they change their credit cards, or they got a death in the family, or whatever it is, that's an accident. Let's get that resolved. Let's not make a fight out of that. But there's that whole idea of the human element, making the decisions, appropriate decisions along the way, waiting until, hey, if they want to fight, if that homeowner is putting up a fight, that's when you give them a good one. Let me have you address the question, because I know there will be some of our listeners out there thinking, we can't raise assessments because that'll push some of our owners into delinquency. Well, from my point of view, I see that board members have to raise assessments. The reality is there's inflation out there. The costs have to go up. And if some people can't afford it, then yes, they can sell. But what else would you say? What counsel can you give for board members who are afraid to raise assessments because they think they'll push someone into delinquency?
First of all, the board of directors has to realize that they have a fiduciary duty to the community association and not to the individuals, including themselves. When they go into that board meeting and before they convene it, they should check their personal agendas at the door. Because really, you've got a board of 7, let's say, and they're hammering out a budget. And what I see it all the time, and I've been a manager, I've seen it. They start at the assessments and work their way up. So they take that round peg and try and put it into that square hole. Well, that doesn't play. That's wrong. If you do not have an honest budget, what are you doing? You're gaslighting yourself.
Yeah, you're doomed from the start.
Because there is no free lunches. And the chickens will always come home to roost. And when the chickens come home to roost, that makes me glad. That doesn't make me sad. Because that means that the association has to do something in order to maintain its value. People who live in community associations do not understand that this is not a rental unit. We're talking about inflation and prices going up. Well, if you lived in a rental building and it was managed well, they still have the same price. You got to live somewhere. They still have the same price pressures and prices go up. You're in a condo or an HOA. It's an investment. Think of it as a business. I'm talking to the owners out there. An assessment is not rent. An assessment is a cash call on your property every month to maintain the property so that the values don't go down. The curb appeal doesn't lose it. Because a management company has many, and a board has many responsibilities. But the number one responsibility is to the association. Matter of fact, when somebody goes delinquent and you don't put them into collections, you're not just doing the association a disservice, you're doing the debtor a disservice. Because if you allow him to dig a hole, he's going to dig a hole 12 feet deep, not 6 feet deep. And that's going to be hard for him or her to climb out of. Again, collection policy says when they go into collections, how much the late fees and late interests are. You'll find that in your bylaws. A lot of your collection policy can be harvested from your bylaws, articles of incorporation, and declaration. And all those 3 parts of your CC&Rs need an attorney to be changed. But your uniform collection policy is part of your rules and regulations, which the board of directors themselves can make, as long as they're not in conflict with federal laws, state statutes, and the association's bylaws. So it is up to the board of directors to put in rules and regulations, a uniform collection policy, which says when something goes to collections, how it goes to collections, who it's sent to for collections. And as a matter of fact, my company just this week released a new piece of technology where we have what is known as APIs with all the software companies, the Zincs, the Banicas, the Enumerates, the BMSs. I don't say all of their names, I'm going to get in trouble. William Caliber, Folio, Yardi. Did I say Enumerate already? Okay.
Yes.
So, all right, guys, don't get me in trouble. I said all of your names, all right? So we have an API. So we pull down all the units. We have them resting on our portfolio, and the association management, the board, launches them into collections. But we now have a new program where the board can set a threshold. So if a board doesn't meet for 6 months, they have a uniform collection policy that says after 2 months or after $500 or $700, they set a number, it automatically goes into collections. But we do not take away the agency of the community association, because we notify them 10 days in advance. These units are staged for collections because we know where they are. We have their ledgers on our portal. And then we said, you could pull them out if you want. And if they don't, they automatically go into collections. And
or you could reach out to the owner and say, hey, you're my neighbor here. I just heard that you were on the collections list. Is there a problem you want to tell me about? Do you want to get that solved before it gets official? And just that those in-between steps. Well, Mitch, you and I are on the verge of getting ourselves wound up here. So
we got to make sure that we close this program.
It is about our business.
The cash flow is the lifeblood to an association, and the boards can't miss that important concept. It's running the association, it's running an organization, but it beats with cash. Well, Mitch, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us on today's program. Any closing thoughts to share with our audience at this time?
Well, yes. It would not be a presentation with Mitch Drimmer without him plugging his book, The Art of Collections for Community Associations. It's a real book. It's dedicated to board members and managers who are trying to make a little better place of their corner of the world. This book, with the code Norland, is free to anybody who sends me an email at mitch@axela, axela-tech.com. Send me an email, and I will send you a copy of my book. You don't need to pay Jeff Bezos for my book. I'm going to send it to you for free because you're with Robert.
Mitch, that's generous. And let's make the discount code a little simpler than my last name. Let's just make the discount code Mitch, M-I-T-C-H.
I heard you on there we go. Heard you on the podcast. Go ahead.
If you order now, we'll send you.
Oh, gee. For more information, or if you have follow-up questions, of course, you can reach Mitch at axela-tech.com, axela-tech.com. Well, we hope you learned some HOA insights from our discussion today that helps you bring common sense to your common areas. We look forward to having you join us for another great episode next week.
You've been listening to HOA Insights, Common Sense for Common Areas. You can listen to the show on our podcast website, hoainsights.org, or subscribe on any of the most popular podcast platforms. You can also watch the show on our YouTube channel. Check the show notes for helpful links. If you like the show and want to support the work we do, you can do so in a number of ways. The most important thing that you can do is engage in the conversation. Leave a question in the comment section on our YouTube videos. You can also email your questions or voice memos to podcast@reservestudy.com, or leave us a voicemail at 805-203-3130. If you gain any insights from the show, please do us a huge favor by sharing the show with other board members that you know. You can also support us by supporting the brands that support this program. Please remember that the views and opinions expressed by the podcast do not constitute legal advice. You'll want to consult your own legal counsel before making any important decisions. Finally, this podcast was expertly mixed and mastered by Stokelight Video and Marketing. With Stokelight on your team, you'll reach more customers with marketing expertise that inspires action. See the show notes to connect with Stokelight.